Sometimes I look at the sky and the clouds, and I think to myself, yes, my life's purpose is indeed to make clouds in Blender and then to teach you how to make those clouds. And thank God that is my purpose, because after this most recent 2.91 update, again, this is the newest version of Blender, after that update, clouds have never been easier to make. And you think that's it? No, this looks like a typical cloud, but when we spin around, you're gonna notice, wait a second, that is the monkey, Suzanne. Once my, potato computer can catch up enough for you to actually realize it's Suzanne, you're gonna notice that this is a mesh cloud, meaning that we used a mesh, in this case Suzanne, to drive a volume, in this case a OpenVDB volume, we'll talk about it, and this is actually incredibly easy to do. There's no messy node stuff going on. It really is just as easy as adding a couple modifiers. So just a bit of warning before I get into this one. This is the 2.91, update, all this, which means it's glitchy as fuck. You fucking add in like a mesh and sometimes this thing crashes. I tried to record this before and it crashed when I added in a monkey and like moved it too much. So do expect, oh, there we go. Do expect crashes. And also, I don't know what the other thing was. Expect to have a lot of fun. I feel like that's a Ducky tutorial. You ever notice that he's always saying, we're going to have a ton of fun here, guys. Whatever. Okay, so let me show you how to make a mesh cloud, again, 2.91. What you're going to do is you're going to start off by adding in whatever geometry you want to drive the mesh. So, for example, kind of the reason everybody does a monkey when talking about this stuff is because all these primitives are lame and, monkeys are easy and it's there, whatever. We're going to add in a monkey. In this case, I want to add in a round of subdivision. So I'm going to click Control 1, which adds in a modifier of subdivision surface with one level, at least in the viewport. If you hit Control 2, it would be 2 levels, whatever. I'm going to hit Control 1. Then we are going to add in a volume, and this is where the magic happens. You want to add in an empty volume. So I guess it's not OpenVDB. I guess I was just, talking about a bunch of nonsense, but what else is new? Add in an empty, and you're going to notice that we don't see anything, and it's not because, this monkey's obstructing it or something. There's nothing to see because it's an empty. What we do is with this volume, you don't actually need to mess with this volume tab. This is more for VDB files. Instead, we are going to go to the modifiers, and you're going to notice that there are 2 modifiers, and it just so happens that both of these are necessary in the process. So you got to be pretty out of it to not be able to follow. We're going to add in both modifiers. Mesh to volume is going to do exactly that. We are going to pick a mesh, particularly this one, to become our volume. Let's do that. And you can see that when we do that, we get a kind of voxel looking display around this and a bit of smoke surrounding our mesh. This updates to wherever our mesh is, including if we were to edit this in edit mode, or if we were to animate it, you can have an animated volume. And it works exactly the way you think. So mesh to volume takes the mesh, makes it into a volume. Some settings you might be interested in or not, but whatever. Let me just talk about it anyways. We have density, which is the density or the thickness of your volume. This is what it looks like in solid mode, but really we're going to be interested in seeing this in cycles. We'll do that in a bit. And the only other one I'm interested in is this voxel amount, which you can think of as 3-dimensional resolution. Not 2-dimensional, but 3-dimensional, where the higher this number is, kind of the tighter or smaller our voxels are going to be. So it looks like it's a higher resolution. It's kind of like if the pixels are smaller, the image resolution's higher, but if the voxel is smaller, the 3D resolution is higher. Wow, makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Okay, so that's the first modifier we need to add, and then the second one is volume displace, which takes our, again, volume that we got from here, and then displaces it, but not in the sense of, the displace modifier for geometry. No, this is 3D-based displacement, but it works the same way. So we can add in a texture, which is going to drive our displacement, and luckily for us, we already have a texture made exactly for this. It's clouds, and it's going to give us a type of noise that, again, this is basically what we're doing here, is picking which noise we want to drive our displacement. Clouds is going to be a nice one because it's generally pretty soft. As you can see, we have this set to soft, and it just looks pretty good. So let's hide our monkey so we don't have to see that. And we could, of course, mess with these settings. So the size is going to be kind of like the size of this 3-dimensional noise, which you can think of as kind of like the frequency of the detail. The bigger this number is, kind of like the less high frequency detail there is. So if we make this small again, you can see we have tiny wisps and all that. Depth is going to be kind of like detail. So you can have a lot of intricate details, or if you bring this down to 1, it's all low resolution or low frequency detail. For clouds, you actually want to keep that pretty low, unless you want a super detailed cloud, which looks pretty weird. And then the only other thing to consider is the strength of of what? The strength of the displacement, which is to say if we had this at 0, it has our monkey. If we were to make it just a bit bigger, we can make it so that it's displaced, but it still has its form. Now, one thing you're probably going to notice is, yes, it made the cloud and it looks good and all that. It moves. By the way, let's move the monkey. By the way, you're going to notice that when we move this monkey, if I can do it, it's actually moving the noise. It's actually sampling different noise. If you don't want that, what you can do is instead of having this be local, you could have it set to the object and all this, and then it would follow. Just a thing that you should know about. But what was I saying? Let's hide this. One thing you're probably thinking is, wow, this is looking like garbage. The shape's right, but the render's looking bad. And yeah, that's because we need lighting to see our volume and all that. So let's go to rendered mode. Technically it's there, but it's Eevee, and I don't like rendering volumes in Eevee. I'm going to switch over to cycles, which already shows us what we're doing a bit better. Let's increase the density, in other words, the thickness of our monkey. Something like 10 is going to make it look super, super dense. And this is a kind of dense cloud. You can have a wispy cloud. You could have whatever you want. We're really getting in the weeds here. If you watch another tutorial about this, I wonder if they put in as much detail as I am now. Okay, enough self-padding. Whatever. What am I saying? So we have a higher density, making our cloud more visible, but again, the lighting's garbage, so let's get rid of the original light and instead add in an HDRI. You do this in the normal way of adding in an environment texture. Plug that in right there, and then for the HDRI, I'm gonna pick something like, I guess each one will give you a different look. I'm gonna go for something like this, which kind of gives you an overcast feel. And if you still don't like the look of your cloud, so in this case, let me get rid of the background. In this case, I like the look of the cloud, but I want it to be kind of whiter because I don't want it to be kind of like a England super gray cloud. What you can do is in shading, for your object, you can add in a material which will automatically recognize you need a principled volume because it's the volume empty. What you can do is you can take this and then make it whiter. Of course, there is a limit to how much you can do this, etc. And the rest of this is basically just going to be reshaping this so it's at least somewhat recognizable. And again, voxel mount is going to make this look less jagged, but it's also going to take much longer to render. Once you bump this up too much, you are definitely going to get a crash. That is one of those scenarios. So that's pretty much the mesh cloud. I'm thinking if there's anything else to talk about. We have the fill volume, which basically takes our mesh and fills it with volume. If we were to disable this, it actually only does it on the shell. Of course, we can't see it because it's so dense. But if we were to make this less intense, actually we could do it in solid mode. You can see that we actually have a shell here where we can pick kind of like the inner radius, how much inwards should the volume reach, and also outwards, where you can actually have it expand beyond this. And this is actually a useful thing that you still have control over when it's filled. If you want your cloud to kind of lose some of its shape and become a bit more blobby. But generally, let's actually bring that back down. Generally, all the stuff you want to mess with is either in, the color of this or in the shape of it, being the displacement and the texture that's driving the displacement. So there you go, mesh-based clouds. It takes forever to render, but what else is new? I guess I should have been on GPU. That would have been a bit helpful. And of course, you can always add in your denoising if you have something better than my garbage potato laptop. Anyways, I hope you learned something from this tutorial. If you did, that's a good thing. And yeah, anyways, if you want to support these tutorials, best way to do that is via Patreon. That Patreon is both for the default Cube and CG Matter channel. Patrons get access to a whole bunch of stuff, including Discord access, private tutorials, project files, etc., etc., etc. But generally, it's just a good way to sustain these tutorials. So thank you to anybody who is willing to do that. And for the 400 some who have already done that, mesh volumes, pretty cool.